Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC, and I'm producer Cameron Costa. On today's episode, what Tim Walz brings to Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign with Wall Streeter turned nonprofit CEO turned Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
When you look at his body of work, he also opens up things like Georgia and North Carolina because of his military background.
Governor Moore on Governor Walz, what a Harris-Walz ticket means for business.
For the business community, you're able to look at his record and say, this is a common sense leader. You know, someone who's been able to not only have Minnesota be one of the fastest growing economies. You look at the fact that it's also the home of GM. It's the home of United Health Group. It's the home of Target. It currently has a 2.9% unemployment rate.
And Disney raising its streaming prices and raking it in big at the box office. Disney CFO Hugh Johnston joins us.
We had the biggest film in May, biggest film in June, and biggest film in July in total, aggregating to almost $3 billion in box office.
Those conversations, plus X is suing advertisers for not advertising. And we're regaining our bearings after a wild couple of market days.
It's like a perfect landing after the balance beam where you don't even go forward, or it's rare.
It's Wednesday, August 7th, and Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1. Cue Andrew.
Good morning. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernen. Becky's off today.
You remember when about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, well, there's a recession. Well, the Fed is high. There will be a recession. Everybody was predicting, and it just seemed like, yeah, we'll get recessions are natural. Now, you really can't get anyone to say, no, I really don't think we're heading into a recession. I think the soft landing is still, you can't get anyone to say, yeah, I do think.
Which in your contrarian thinking
makes me think that recessions never come when everyone's expecting it. Right. So everyone's expecting it. Now no one is, 114,000 is fine. 4.3 is for the unemployment rate. That's very, very low historically. So now you're hearing, all kinds of sort of excuses for why. And maybe we always said for the Fed to really, it's like a perfect landing after the balance beam where you don't even go forward, or
it's like Biles.
It's rare. That's why you become the GOAT, because you are able to stick a landing like that. It hasn't been very common in the past for the Fed to absolutely stick the soft landing. Maybe they do this time.
Social media platform X filing suit against a global advertising alliance, accusing it of conspiring to boycott the platform and rob it of billions of dollars in revenue. X saying the alleged conspiracy by the Global Alliance for Responsible Media violated U.S. antitrust law. In a video message, X CEO Linda Yaccarino arguing a small group shouldn't be able to dictate what kind of content gets monetized.
These organizations targeted our company and you, our users. The evidence and facts are on our side. They conspired to boycott X, which threatens our ability to thrive in the future.
Ad sales crumbled, of course, after Elon Musk had bought that platform. And I say, of course, not because he bought the platform, but just because we all know that's what ultimately happened. The company is was doing at least $1 billion in sales each quarter. That's down about $150 million a quarter now. What do you think of this, by the way? Suing the advertisers because they're not advertising.
Right. I was thinking actually that I was revisiting my default position on Google a little bit too. Some of the censorship and some of the other things, the way they prioritize certain things.
So now you want them to be sued.
No, I just think that maybe Google. I just think that maybe Google might not be the perfect corporate citizen.
So now you're willing to
I don't know. I'm open to talking to you about it. I'm open to talking about it. Normally, I'd say let the chips fall where they may. But in this case,
how do you like the idea of you're suing the advertiser, saying you're not advertising with us, so we're suing you?
If it's because they don't like their ads next to things that don't toe the Mark Zuckerberg liberal line, then I would be angry that's.
By the way, I think Mark Zuckerberg has.
I know, but I'm talking about in general out there. Remember what Twitter used to look like before they fired 15,000 people they didn't need.
But the question is, do you think that the advertisers should be allowed to talk to each other?
Well, to set prices, definitely.
Not to set prices, but to make decisions like this.
Right.
Or to say, hey, we think these guys are not a good publisher, or this guy, we like this guy, we don't like this guy.
No, that doesn't sound.
It's very interesting.
Doesn't sound good. Although the things that go on, that we don't assume are actually going on would probably
blow your mind.
Don't you think?
Probably. Across the board.
Yeah.
U.S. District Judge has denied Harvard's request to drop a lawsuit against the university that alleged the school didn't do enough to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitism. The judge said, quote, Harvard failed its Jewish students based on the evidence. The lawsuit filed in January by 6 Jewish students in Massachusetts federal court, saying students didn't feel safe on campus, and alleges the school didn't punish anti-Semitic student protesters and faculty members. Now, Harvard had asked to dismiss that lawsuit in April. It argued that that breaking up the protests would have infringed on the First Amendment rights of those students. And the judge also said that the court, quote, is dubious that Harvard can hide behind the First Amendment. So this case is going to go forward, and a lot of attention on what it ultimately could mean. Again, not just about Harvard, but First Amendment issues and the anti-Semitism, which continues to be pervasive in this country.
I don't even want to delve into all of this. It's kind of in the rearview mirror. I don't think we should forget those protests and the number of not just the outside agitators, but the number of what was organic from the academics at those institutions and from a lot of the students that openly advocated positions that are absolutely
so
beyond.
So the question is it in the rearview mirror, or is it just going underground again?
Here's what I didn't want to discuss. Here's what I'm getting to. I'm seeing on Twitter that the reason that this I told you this dude. Did you watch him yesterday? Shapiro,
who's fantastic.
He's an assassin. So I don't know why he wasn't picked, but there are some people saying that the anti-Hamas or that the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. Is there a pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party? That's an easy way of saying it's too trite. That probably. But if you want to describe it quickly, that's what it is. And there is some appeasement and some. I think they bent Democrats to the worry about Michigan and Minnesota, and it basically is appeasing the pro-Hamas wing of and there should not be a pro-Hamas wing.
First of all, I pray that there's not a pro-Hamas wing.
But
I think
but what do you think there is? What should we?
I think that
what should we call? Okay, how about
there are some people
and one of them's gone
that are in Washington.
Cory Bush is
that have views that you know.
That's what I mean. Well, what do you think happened yesterday? Why do you think? There's a lot of reasons. Maybe we'll talk about it.
I imagine that there's a lot of reasons.
But that might be one of them.
There was a piece in Politico that suggested that the camaraderie, the relationship, between Kamala Harris and Walz.
You heard what I said. I think Shapiro would outshine on policy issues and everything else. I think he'd outshine.
I think it's fair to say that there was a view apparently, and I just from the reporting, that there were people inside her camp who thought that he was either a showboater or something else. That, by the way,
because he's got the goods,
and he has the goods. I'm not saying he doesn't have the goods. This is not a.
Not everyone has the goods.
This is not a defense of the decision.
Well, this is what I didn't want to get into, but
I'm praying that it's not about Shapiro being Jewish.
But then
that's what I'm hoping.
No, not that he's necessarily Jewish, but that there are people that are so worried about the perception of not being. Not there's the haves, the have-nots, the Palestinians, the two-state solution. There's all these things. And if you aren't fully on board with that, if you're far left, you need to be fully on board with it.
Take all of that out and just say straight-up anti-Semitism. Just say straight-up anti-Semitism.
See,
I'm not saying the vice president, I don't believe it's an anti-Semitic, that they're anti-Semitic.
Right.
I'm saying that
But you can
in this moment, in this terrible moment. In fact, I will, as an American Jew, I will say I know somebody who literally said to me yesterday, said, you know, given our popularity right now in the world, that might be the right decision. I was like, oh my God, that's terrible to say.
I don't like
terrible. That. But my point is that is in people's head. Did you see what Van Jones said yesterday?
No, I'm afraid to.
No, he said that he believed that anti-Semitism is marbled into the Democratic Party. That's what he said.
Well,
and that there's a strain inside the party.
Well,
and that's where you're going with this.
Well, I'm not really going there. It's just people were actually saying that the reason that they didn't pick Shapiro was to appease the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. There really shouldn't be a pro-Hamas wing.
I absolutely agree with you. There should be no pro-Hamas wing. That whole idea is crazy. And I pray it's not true.
Next on Squawk Pod, it's the happiest place on earth. Disney CFO Hugh Johnston says after Disney's big quarter and hiking streaming prices, all things are going well in the Magic Kingdom.
Most importantly, the entertainment business, which is really the heart of Disney, is performing exceptionally well right now. You know, in a lot of ways, we've returned ourselves to the standard of excellence that we had when we were producing multiple billion-dollar films per year.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod from CNBC.
You're watching Squawk Box. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin along with Joe Kernen. Becky is off. Among today's top stories, a lot of things going on. Disney, the entertainment giant, announcing price hikes for its streaming service starting mid-October. Most plans for Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus are going to cost $1 to $2 more per month. The most expensive plan for Hulu, which includes live TV, is going to cost $6 more per month. Now, basic and premium Disney Plus will be priced at $9.99 and $15.99. Then Hulu with ads will cost $9.99 monthly, while Hulu without ads will cost $18.99 monthly.
Whoa.
ESPN Plus, which features ads, will cost $11.99 per month.
What'd I tell you about this? Hulu, I mean, how much is that? Hulu's much more valuable than Disney's trying to say. Much more valuable than Disney is letting on.
Because parent company of
Oh, I
CNBC.
forgot. I wasn't even thinking about that.
Where are you going with this?
No, I was thinking about that. It's worth a lot more. If you look at
explain your view about this. No, explain the
kidding. I'm kind of kidding. Hulu was like a crown jewel. Got down to where no one wanted it. It was like a hot potato. You take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. And then we knew Disney. Disney said, okay, we'll take it. We need scale and everything for streaming. We'll take it, but it's not that great. And, you know, there's a minimum price that it was agreed upon with Comcast. Now, I'm just saying that things are starting to turn. Profitability might be starting to come for streaming.
Yep.
And Hulu now, I think, is worth a lot more, so they better pay up to get the remaining part.
Well, and then the other big question is if all these prices are getting raised at a time when the consumer is strained, if you believe that's true,
we'll see
it's
whether
going to be
it
very
sticks.
interesting to see what kind of sub
We'll
numbers.
see if it sticks. Right.
You can hold.
Right.
At
See
these
if it
prices.
sticks.
I assume they're going to think that, I don't know this, but I would assume they're going to guide for either flat or lower number of ultimate subscribers.
Right.
Not ultimate subscribers,
Maybe.
but
we'll get, watching the Olympics with Peacock. Obviously, Peacock suddenly is looking a little, the tail feathers looking a little better, it's strutting its stuff a little. And I just think that we're turning the corner, don't you think, finally, in streaming? Because if everybody's cutting the cord, they're still watching. They're doing something. So it's either Roku or something.
Right. The question is how many of the services you're going to have. That's the ultimate question.
Right.
How many of these things are you going to have?
What's your streaming bundle look like?
Right? Are you having two? Is the average American family? So the Kernen family might have 5. The Sorkin family might be lucky enough to have 5. But I don't know if every family is really going to have 5. They might all have Netflix. That seems to be the standard bearer of the one. And then the question is, what are you layering on? Is Hulu your next one?
Right.
Is Peacock your next one? Is HBO Max your next one?
Do you see the money going out to the streaming services? Do you have any idea what's happening?
You mean, do I follow what's going on my credit card? Is that what you're trying to inquire?
Do you handle that side of the business, the Sorkin business? I handle the incoming side. I don't, the expense side, I'm not sure how that gets taken care of.
I monitor things.
Why am I not surprised? Why? I'm paying for stuff, I'm sure, that I haven't used for years. Is there a way you can find that out? Like
Once a month, you can look at your bill.
Look at the bill.
You look
that
at
would
the bill.
entail looking at the bill.
Yep. By the way, I do look, and then I say, okay, we got to
do this.
We got to do this. We got to do that.
Yeah.
But, and sometimes I say, this is the austerity month for us.
Would you look
folks.
at my bill? For
I
me?
can do that. Disney just out with earnings of $1.39 a share, better than the $1.19 that the street had been expecting. The company also beating on revenue of $23.16 billion, marking the first revenue beat since May of 2023. Joining us right now, Hugh Johnston, Disney CFO. Hugh, it's great to see you. Congratulations on what has turned out to be a great quarter. Want to talk about that great quarter. Also want to talk about the experiences piece of this, because that's clearly a challenged part of the business. And I think a lot of people have questions just about where the consumer is going in this country and elsewhere around the world. And then I want to get into the pricing issue, given that some of your streaming products are going to go up in price, and just how much pricing power you think you ultimately have. But let's go back in time first and talk about this last quarter.
Yeah, happy to. Good morning. Great to be with you guys, as always. Quarter was very strong, as you noted, 4% revenue growth, 35% EPS growth. And as a result of that, we raised the EPS guidance for the year to 30% growth. So certainly feel really good about that. Portfolio is working very, very well. And as you all have noted, most importantly, the entertainment business, which is really the heart of Disney, is performing exceptionally well right now. You know, in a lot of ways, we've returned ourselves to the standard of excellence that we had when we were producing multiple billion-dollar films per year. And we had the three biggest films the biggest film in May, biggest film in June, and biggest film in July in total, aggregating to almost $3 billion in box office. So feel really, really terrific about how that business is going. And that, of course, pumps oxygen into the rest of the company. So, yeah, it's been a great quarter, and we feel very, very optimistic about the future.
On the streaming side, is this a major turn? I mean, we've swung from a big loss, obviously, to a gain now. Is this a turning point not just for you, but do you think this is a turning point for streaming more broadly?
Well, we certainly think it is for us. And if you look at sort of where we've been over the last few years, you go back a couple of years ago, we were losing $1 billion in a quarter. Now we're at the point where we said we were going to make money in Q4. We actually did in Q3. And our expectation is we're going to continue to go up from here. So very, very positive about that business. You mentioned pricing as well, and I'll get in front of that one a little bit. You know, it's interesting. People tend to focus on price, but remember, value is what the consumer receives. Price is what the consumer pays. And the value that we're putting into the streaming service with our IP right now, with Inside Out 2 coming, and with all the great TV shows like The Bear and Abbott Elementary and Shogun, we feel like we're earning pricing. And as a result, we can take that pricing.
Your expectation, Hulu without ads, $18.99. Hulu with ads, $9.99. Obviously, there's a $9 differential. I assume you're still making more money on Hulu with ads than without ads. What percentage of your customer long-term do you think is going to be watching it with ads and without ads, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the reality of it is we're relatively indifferent between whether they choose with or without ads. We feel good about it. And what we're trying to do is give the consumer the most choice they have and make the decisions they want based on their economics and how they want to invest their time. So if they want ads, that's terrific news for us. If they want it without ads, we're perfectly fine with that as well. It's hard to predict where it's going to land. We'll see what the consumer tells us, and we'll adjust accordingly.
How much growth are you expecting on the subscriber side with these new price increases?
Yeah, so we said in the next quarter we'll grow modestly. Beyond that, anytime you take pricing, you typically get a little bit of dislocation, but I think the climb is going to be inexorably upward. So we've got a product that we think is really terrific right now. The combination of Disney Plus, along with Hulu, along with ESPN, and of course we're launching a tile of ESPN on the Disney Plus app in the fourth quarter. We'll be bringing Flagship with ESPN later in the year. We think we've got a terrific value proposition and really a great broad brand portfolio that makes it very attractive to consumers.
Hugh, I don't know if you were hearing Joe and I talking earlier about Hulu and the value of Hulu and how much Hulu is worth and maybe how much it should be worth. How does this change the value of Hulu, or does it?
What an asset, Hugh. Oh my God! It's like a crown jewel. It's like a gem.
There's a Homer situation
like
here,
a
obviously,
crown jewel.
because and we should just say there's an arbitration going on actually between our parent company Comcast and your company over that valuation. I believe you believe it's worth something like $27.5 billion. I think Comcast believes it's worth something like $40 billion. I also wonder, are you supposed to freeze it in time, or does this have any impact on it? I don't know.
Shouldn't have any impact on it, but guys, I'm married to a lawyer, and one of the things she taught me long ago was when you're in the middle of a legal case, don't talk about it in public.
Oh my God! Pay up, Johnston.
Let me ask you a question about something I think you can speak to, though, which is the experiences part, the parks situation. Obviously, you made a big point in your release to talk about just how that is now becoming a challenged business, or at least more challenged than it used to be. What do you see going forward, and what are you seeing about the consumer right now? Because if people are going to take price up on streaming, for example, but then they won't go to the parks, how do you think about those two things?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on the business. First, we actually grew the business in the quarter. So, I mean, I know it's a little bit short of expectations, but this is not a business that was down from a revenue perspective. Attendance in domestic parks was flat. And in addition to that, per caps were up a little bit. So the business is in a fundamentally healthy place. It's just a little bit softer than it was before. The second thing to keep in mind is, compared to where we may have been 5 or 10 years ago, 40% of that experiences business is either consumer products or international parks. And those businesses are doing very well right now. So obviously the U.S. consumer is a little bit soft. You've seen it from a whole variety of consumer companies reporting that we're both well familiar with. But in reality, people will tend to hang on to their vacations quite strongly because it's an important piece to the family unit. And as a result, we think this is just going to be a few quarters and we'll be fine coming out of it.
The question about travel, though, and we were looking at these Airbnb earnings, for example, which were actually way below expectations, is whether the sort of YOLO life is coming to an end here.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the case for a couple of reasons. Certainly, the lower income decile consumers are a little bit more stressed, and they're dialing back and watching their dollars more. At the same time, higher income consumers are traveling internationally much more, and we can see that in the data that we get. Those people, we think, eventually they're going to come back, and as they come back, the attendance will start to come. So, one of the things about this business, and it's a great business because it has such terrific IP, it tends to get hit late, it gets hit less, and it recovers early relative to the other theme parks that are out there. So I do believe the parks business is in fundamentally good shape. It's just a little bit softer than it was before, and we think it's going to continue to grow as we look forward to the coming quarters.
You've also announced the pricing of Venue, which is the sports bundle that's going to be coming. What's your expectation of what that does ultimately to the larger bundle at this point, at that price point? It's $42.99?
$42.99 is the number. That's right. It's a great question. What we've really tried to do with ESPN, and look, ESPN is obviously the strongest consumer franchise out there in sports, right? In the third quarter, we actually had a 49% share of sports viewing with ESPN. We're trying to bring sports to the fan wherever they are and in any way they want it. So if they want it through the bundle, that's great. If they want it through ESPN Plus, a relatively narrow app, that's great. Flagship adds a little bit more. Venue adds a little bit more. So we're trying to create consumer choice and then allow those consumers to choose how it is that they want to view sports and how much sports they want.
But do you expect that it will accelerate the unbundle of the bundle, if you will?
I don't think so in a material way. I think we're more picking up people who've probably exited the bundle. Now, at the margins, might it a little bit? I suppose that's true, but we don't see that as a major strategic thrust with Venue.
And how do you see the profit sharing or revenue sharing, at least in the early days, there'll probably be revenue sharing, but we'll see, between your partners? And I'm thinking now of Warner Brothers, because if TNT doesn't have basketball, I imagine that's going to mean that the sharing program is going to look different. No?
Well, of course, they'll have it for the upcoming season. So that doesn't really kick into gear till the following season. We're all going to get paid based on the rates that we receive out of the broader cable deals that we have. So from that perspective, no real change. We're relatively indifferent.
But they may not hold on to those rates, is the point. Yeah,
that's going to be something that we'll all have to take a look at when we get closer to that point.
Okay. Hugh, we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for joining us this morning, and congratulations on a great report and moving up a quarter early on that streaming number. So great.
Thanks. Great to be with you guys.
Cheese will be next.
Next on Squawk Pod, unpacking Kamala Harris's running mate pick. What Tim Walz brings to the Harris campaign, particularly for the business community. Maryland Governor and former Wall Streeter himself, Wes Moore.
We're talking about how do you create real economic growth where you're able to work in partnership between the private sector and also government, and know the private sector is a partner with government inside this work and not an adversary.
What's important to this new Democratic ticket?
This is going to be about what is going to be the impact and the hope of the Harris-Walz administration, which I do think will have some differences with what we're seeing within the Biden-Harris administration.
That big conversation right after this. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC.
Stand by, Joe. His mic, Q.
I'm Joe Kernen, along with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Becky is off today.
Kamala Harris hitting Wisconsin today with her newly named running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the vice president, focusing heavily on swing states this week. And joining us right now on the Harris-Walz ticket, and specifically its level of support among business leaders. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, he's a surrogate for the Harris campaign, also one of 50 Democratic leaders on the Harris campaign's National Advisory Board, and a former Wall Streeter himself. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning. Good to see you.
What was your reaction to the Walz pick, and to the extent you can speak to what the donor class and maybe the business community is thinking about this?
You know, my thoughts were I was ecstatic. I thought it was a great pick, not just because it opens up so many different areas electorally. You know, Tim Walz is someone who's going to be not just be able to do well within the quote unquote blue wall of the Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania grouping, but also I think about his background as a military veteran. The guy was a sergeant major in the Army. He then came back to become a coach. He then went on to become a congressman. You know, when you look at his body of work, he also opens up things like Georgia and North Carolina because of his military background. So I think he is just a great partner and he's a great fit. And I think for the business community, you're able to look at his record and say, you know, this is a common sense leader. You know, someone who's been able to not only have Minnesota be one of the fastest growing economies. If you look at the fact that it's also the home of GM, it's the home of United Health Group, it's the home of Target. It currently has a 2.9% unemployment rate, but also saying that you can be pro-business and also say you're going to take care of the most vulnerable. It doesn't have to be a binary choice. And I think that's an exciting vision for people to be able to embrace. Governor,
to the extent that there are donors who looked at Shapiro as somebody who was more moderate, do you agree with that assessment? I'll also say, by the way, and Speaker Johnson yesterday said that Shapiro was, quote, overlooked for the vice presidential election because of his Jewish heritage and his position on Gaza. And I was curious what you think about that. Well, I think that the vice president went through and made the decision on the person who she felt most comfortable with. I think it's really important for people to remember that the vice presidential selection is not a box checking exercise or what a person can get you or can't get you. This really is in its purest form. It's the person making a decision that of who do I want as my partner at the end of the day. And she had wonderful options to be able to choose from. And I think she selected a wonderful option in Tim Walz. And for the people in the business community, I think about what we had here in the state of Maryland, where when I was inaugurated, we started off 43rd in unemployment. Now we're going on 12 straight months of amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, because we are doing in Maryland what I know Tim Walz believes in Minnesota, and saying that you can actually be pro-business. You can do things like addressing permitting reform and cutting regulatory red tape and making it easier for businesses to be able to grow and thrive in your jurisdiction, and make sure you're dealing with issues like housing, dealing with issues like child poverty, dealing with issues like education, because that's actually the best way to create a pipeline for businesses and be able to pipeline for economic growth. And so I think that the thing that the business community will see is that in Tim Walz, what you have is a successful chief executive of a state, and of a state that's doing economically well. And there's a reason for that, because having that data-driven, heart-led approach is something that does work.
Governor, it's good to see you, by the way. It's been a while.
Good to see you, too. Yes.
Yeah. There are some that, talk about in terms of a lot of Vice President Harris's positions, and it's a good way to say it is to say probably a similar to what we've seen in the Biden administration. And politicians, when they're senators, it's different than perhaps when they're a vice president. But there are some things that the vice president is on the record for saying in the past that maybe she wouldn't say now. And some people thought that that's why a more centrist vice president might help her get to that position. And I just thought it was interesting. You mentioned United Healthcare being based in Minnesota, when one of Vice President Harris's positions was no private insurance companies remaining, that it's got to be universal health care for all. That would not be good for United Healthcare in Minnesota. And I'm wondering how, there's a lot of things that she's going to have to clarify. It's been 2 weeks and it's a honeymoon period, but we still don't know that much about how she feels. And some people say the pick of Governor Walz moves her further to the left, or at least keeps her in the left where she was.
No, I would actually say that, you have, and what leaders do, leaders are consistently moving and processing information, and then being able to make the decisions that they know are in the best interest of their people. I know, and I can tell you that her policy right now is not a healthcare for all position. That when we're talking about how do you create real economic growth, where you're able to work in partnership between the private sector and also government, and know the private sector is a partner with government inside this work and not an adversary, is something that's important, and something that I know is a deep belief of a Harris-Walz campaign, and will be of a Harris-Walz administration. One thing that we know is that we now are going to have 80 days for people to get a clear understanding of where the individual policies are. And the thing that we know about the vice president is when she's pushing for things like making sure that we can have an enhanced child tax credit, making sure that we can do things like investing in childcare so we can actually get people back into the workforce, when we're making sure that we can invest in high quality education so we can create a better pipeline for both employees and employers, that kind of stuff does matter. And so I think over these next 80 days, we will have a chance to see real clarification on these issues. And I'm confident that the American people will see that the Harris-Walz administration is going to be one that's going to be best for the future economic growth for this country.
Okay, Governor, I got a hard one for you. There have been a lot of calls from the donor class specifically on Harris to potentially move away, if you will, from Lena Khan, for example, and to try to have a different type of regulatory regime that might be more open to transactions and deal making and other things like that. Do you think that we are going to hear about a shift in terms of her regulatory views, and do they really differ from President Biden?
I think we will, and I think we have to. And I think, making sure that we have a regulatory body that's able to have and influence free markets, that is able to have and influence real capital and liquidity flow, making sure that we are both supporting our small businesses and making it easier for small businesses to be able to grow, and also making it easier for our large industries to be able to compete within our states and within this country, is something that I think is going to be important. And I think it is important for people to remember, too, that as the vice president is thinking about a future-facing administration, that there are going to be different dynamics that are going to require different philosophies. There will be different socio-political and just political dynamics that is going to require a different set of a vision, a different lens and a different vision. And I think that's what the vice president is going to be able to offer. This is not just going to be how are we speaking about the work of the Biden-Harris administration. This is going to be about what is going to be the impact and the hope of the Harris-Walz administration, which I do think will have some differences with what we're seeing within the Biden-Harris administration.
Governor, do you think there is a wing of the Democratic Party right now that is more pro-Palestine? I don't want to say pro-Hamas, but more pro-Palestine than pro-Israel? And do you think that there was anything in the decision yesterday related to that, whether it's being able to win Michigan it certainly gets bandied about. What we saw on college campuses was mind-boggling. I'm couching my terms, calling
Van Jones, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Governor Moore said it specifically yesterday. He said that he believed that there was a strain of anti-Semitism that was marbled into the Democratic Party.
Marbled
and as somebody
in
who's Jewish and American, it was upsetting to hear.
I think there is a dangerous stream of anti-Semitism that still is cloaked within American society. I don't think this is a political party issue. I'm looking at the fact that just this past year, I've now had to allocate millions of dollars going towards hardening homes of worship so people could go and worship their God in safety and peace. That I have now had to spend, where I do my weekly updates with our intelligence agents about what we're seeing and what we're hearing. We have seen just an absolutely dangerous rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim attacks, activities, and threats. So we know that as a nation, this is something that we must wrestle with, and it's something that we must deal with, and we cannot shy away from it. That the beauty of this country, the beauty of what makes the country great, is the fact that we can have an all-inclusive society and a place where people feel safe in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and in their own skin. That's what makes this country so unique in world history. And that's the kind of values that we have to fight for. So I think that the dangers that we've seen of anti-Semitism, this is not a political issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It is not a Republican issue. This is something this country must wrestle with and something that this country must deal with. And we must deal with it throughout a sense and a lens of love.
Governor Moore, I want to thank you. Appreciate it very, very much.
That's the podcast for today. Thank you for tuning in, as always. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin, weekday mornings on CNBC, starting at 6 a.m. Eastern. To get the best of that TV broadcast right into your ears, follow us here on Squawk Pod wherever you're listening now. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.